Assalamu alaikum jami'an. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our panel, Imagining a Public Innovation Lab for Qatar, the first edition of our new series, Ibtechar Majlis. The Mejlis, as we know it, is an integral part of Qatari culture, a place where people come together to exchange ideas, share opinions, and learn across generations. It is where wisdom meets curiosity and where knowledge becomes a bridge for growth. Ibtechar Majlis built on an ongoing efforts through roundtables, discussions, where we brought together thought leaders, practitioners from diverse sectors to share insights and co-create solutions. Today's conversation continues that spirit. Public innovation labs are powerful catalysts for change to provide governments with safe spaces to test ideas, co-create solutions with citizens, and deliver smart, more agile public services. Please join me in welcoming our panelist, Iman Al-Kuwari, Director of Digital Innovation at the Ministry of Communication and Information Technology, Dr. George Dimitris, Professor and Associate Dean of Research, College of Law at Hamad bin Khalifa University, Hassa Timemi, Director of Governmental Innovation Department at Civil Services and Government Development Bureau, and Jude Al-Jhani, Executive Director of Strategy and Programs at Qatar Research Development and Innovation Council. We are honored to have you all with us today. Let's begin our conversation, our Majlis, where collective wisdom becomes the foundation of a shared progress. Thank you guys for joining us. So, as a starting of our conversation discussion in the Majlis, and it should be casual, insightful, we might debate, we might disagree, but it's for the benefit of all of us. Yani. As a starting point, I would like to set a foundation and the stage of how do we define innovation from each lenses. And I think it's important for us just to have a good picture on what could be the big picture and the small picture as well. And with that, I would like to start with Jude on, from your lenses, from QRDI, how do you define public innovation as a QRDI?
Okay, so first, thank you, Naif, for arranging this beautiful panel. I think we're all excited to share insights when it comes to public innovation. So good afternoon, everyone. In QRDI, we actually view and differentiate between public innovation and government innovation, even though they're both very intersected and very interconnected. So when we talk about government innovation, it's simple. It's how government actually innovates within itself, right? So how does government improve policies, services, service delivery, operations in general? So how government would be more agile, data-driven, citizen-focused, right? But when it comes to public innovation, on the other hand, it's about creating innovation for public value, right? So that means it's about mobilizing the wider ecosystem, whether it was government entities, private sector, corporates, or startups, and academic institutions as well. And from our perspective as QRDI, we really, our mission bridges between both of those concepts, right? And most of our, if not all our programs, whether enabling or funding, support these two different concepts.
A follow-up on that, Jude, the dual role for the government between adapting innovation and enabling innovation. How do you see that as well?
Yeah, so we do see government as having a dual role, right? So as an adopter, it's about translating, first defining, of course, the challenges or the problem statements within the different government entities, but also understanding how innovations can support those different challenges. So as an adopter, government really plays a key role in being kind of the first customer and the early adopter. And that creates confidence in the market. But not only that, it also demonstrates demand for innovation. And as an enabler, I think it's a very important role that government entities and government agencies have towards that. Actually, enabling innovation for the sectors that those government entities oversee is key, right? And it's about again opening up cross-sector partnerships, and it's about policies and standards and enabling conditions that would support the wider ecosystem for innovation.
Beautiful. Moving to Hassa, so with CGB and technically the addition, the mandate with the government development sector, you guys kicked off the government accelerator.
Correct.
And that had a huge impact on the government structure by adding innovation team within each hierarchy. So how do you guys define innovation from your lenses?
Correct. So first of all, I would like to thank you, Mr. Naya, for inviting us today. I believe this is a really important discussion. Since innovation, I would say, yes, Qatar started innovation for the past 10, 15 years ago, but now there's a great emphasis on innovation and to enable the government to be more innovative in delivering the services. So to your question, yes, correct. CGB we recently launched the Government Accelerator. If you look around, there are the think tanks in innovation and they are the incubators, but the accelerators were not there. So I would say we are the first accelerator in the state. We're focusing on the national projects. So basically we are connecting, we're acting like as a bridge between the national projects and the operational reality of it. So basically we are rethinking how the government should operate. We're rethinking about how the services should be designed, how the operations should be managed. Not only this one, but we also enable the government teams and entities to be themselves innovative and to adapt the mindset, because innovation, if it's about systems, that would be an easy adaptation. But when you're dealing with people and the mindset, that where the challenges realize. I remember once I was meeting with an entity, and one of the people told me, like, innovation is a privilege. And what, are you trying to create Steve Jobs in every organization? I'm like, why not? I would love to be one day. But that's not the purpose. Basically, innovation, it pushes you beyond your comfort zone, where you actually start to see it's a way of living. I mean, this is the only way that we can advance. And also, I have to highlight that all of us in the room, we're contributing on the Global Innovation Index. And whether it's CGB, QRDI, MCIT, the academia as well, the private sector as well, we all contribute to the GII. And it's good, I think this is a great venue now to celebrate that Qatar has recently jumped 1 point. We were at 49 in the GII, today we're 48. So over these past 7 years, I would say Qatar jumped from 70 to 48. This is something that we can really celebrate. And this wouldn't be able to happen if there would be no collaboration between the government entities among themselves and adopting the innovation as a way to move forward.
Jamil. Moving to Iman, from MCIT, يعني ما شاء الله MCIT is one of the most progressive ministries in Qatar, given the fact that they are mandated with the digital transformation. So that comes with policy, infrastructure, capacity across. And MCIT is one of the ministries that launched the first innovation lab in Qatar, focusing on technology. So from your angle, how do you guys define government innovation?
First of all, Naif, I would like to thank you for gathering us here today. And I think this is one of the fun conversations amongst colleagues. And we're always talking on different topics together, but it's good to share it with the public here and for them to get an understanding of what we're doing jointly. And from MCIT's perspective, I would like to say that we are reimagining how the government is working on such topics in the public sector. It's about bringing value to the services. It's becoming more connected, smarter and faster. And of course, it's also by looking at all the aspects related to the policies and regulations, as you mentioned, and keeping that within the way that we are innovating in our processes. And I think one of the major things, as Hissa mentioned, it is building a mindset of innovation within the government and trying for them to have the ability to experiment, test, and see the validity of what they're trying to implement. And there is always complementary roles between the two entities. And for us, technology is the means and not the end. And we need to look at how technology can be applied in different areas and how we can reinvent on that. The Innovation Lab was created to create a safe environment for us to experiment and look at emerging technologies implementation, but also for us to be more inclusive of the ecosystem. MCIT plays a big role as an orchestrator. We are working with the partners from the private sector, from academia, as well as the startup ecosystem. As you know, we have an incubation program, we have an accelerator program, and this is a way for us to bring all of these different talents into one room and look at how we can address a problem. So this is one of the Innovation Lab roles as an orchestrator.
Interesting. Dr. George, as mentioned several times across the panelists, about the policy and its role in literally fostering that kind of movements and wave. Looking at your role from academia, how do you see the collaboration between academia and government takes a crucial role in advancing public policy to enable things?
Thank you so much, Naif. First, allow me to thank you as well as Ibtechar. I've been roughly 10 years in Qatar teaching at HBKU, and I think it's the first time I go to an event which is organized by a private organization. Congratulations, kudos. I'm very happy and proud to be here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us as well as my co-panelists. The nexus is super important. Very little can happen, in fact, without the nexus. Academia brings in innovation, the new ideas, right? On the other side, the government brings what? Implementability, right? On the one side, academia brings evidence-based. On the other side, only government knows what are the real policy challenges, right? Nobody else knows that. Now, the ideas on the one side are not enough. The state is the only organization that people have created over the last 250 years that can actually do what? Pull resources together, right? There is no other organization with this capacity. It is in a way part of the obligations of the state to pull resources together, from the academy, from the private sector, from within the government itself, right? And number two, it has something that nobody else has to such an extent: money, budget. The biggest innovations that have ever happened, especially if we speak about our modern times, have come through this collaboration between a government on the one side and the academia on the other side. In fact, the very notion of big science or grand science comes from the collaboration between the government and academia. Take the Manhattan Project. Of course, it led something to was eventually used for tragic purposes, right? But this is what, in a way, gave rise to a whole new understanding about what science actually means, right? Or more recent examples, the COVID vaccines, right? We wouldn't have had COVID vaccines, introduced at this fast pace without this collaboration. In fact, all three first vaccines that were launched on the market, introduced on the market, were actually the result of the collaboration between universities in the United States as well as Europe on the one side and the government on the other. Of course, one shouldn't forget about the internet itself, right? In the 1960s, 1970s, the internet started as an internal closed circuit of communications, right, between DARPA, a government agency of the Department of Defense in the United States, and collaboration with computer scientists as well as others at the University of California, Los Angeles, Stanford, etc., etc. Now, one example from within Qatar, and I think the ministry is further working on updating it, namely the AI policy that Qatar adopted something like 5-6 years ago, it must be now, I guess, right? That was done in conjunction with Qatar Computing Research Institute, which is a part of my own university, HBKU. And as far as I can tell, and Iman will correct me if I'm wrong, they are currently working on updating that framework. It's a strategy.
Okay, so it was the strategy that HBKU QSRI has pushed for, with a clear framework for the government to adopt. And I think this is where academia played a very strong role in pushing the government towards it. And I think this is a great role to see how academia can encourage the government to look at areas where the trends are moving and be an early adopter. This actually put Qatar on the map as one of the early adopters in terms of having an AI strategy.
Interesting. Dr. George, building on that comment, once we already set the stage on the definition of innovation, how we look at it from different institutions, if we move to the second topic, basically transferring an idea to something tangible, vision to implementation, policy to implementation, I would like you to give us more about the trade lab that HBKU has. And what other public innovation labs could learn out of that experience where you use research to create a practical policy through the lab itself.
Thank you so much, Naif, for raising this. So we do actually at the HBKU operate a trade lab. In fact, it is a partnership between HBKU, the College of Law, as well as the College of Islamic Studies, as well as Georgetown University in Qatar. So our lab is a lab on the digital economy with an emphasis on digital trade. We started operating the lab this past year, and we will be having the second edition of the lab in the next semester, in fact. So what we do is we bring students together to offer pro bono work and advice to the government. So feel free to come to us. Please, we will be very happy to support any of the work that we do here in the government. In fact, in this past year, we worked on 2 projects which were given to us by the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. One project which was in collaboration with UN ESCAP, the Economic and Social Council for Asia and the Pacific. And I would like to touch upon that project in a second, as well as we also work with the Asian Development Bank to help the Asian Development Bank develop its strategy when it comes to digital trade. In fact, the publications that will be coming out of the ADB, the Asian Development Bank, have been informed by our work. But the one project that I would really like to stress on is the one that we did with the UN ESCAP. We work together, students at HBKU, that's graduate students in law from 3 different programs. Undergraduate students from Georgetown University in Qatar, both in economics as well as politics. We work together with this international organization alongside law students from the JD program at the Georgetown University Law Center in Washington, D.C. And we help them develop a manual for trade negotiations and the use of generative artificial intelligence, namely an ethics code on the use of generative artificial intelligence in trade negotiations, especially for countries that don't have the capacity to have very big legal teams or negotiating teams to go back to. I'm very proud of the work that we did, and we're hoping to continue the same work. Now, what can we learn from that? Number one, collaboration is possible, right? If you do the math here, we had 4 institutions working together in, depending on your count, 2 or 3 different continents, roughly 10, 12 people working together. It is possible, and we produced a fantastic result. Now, having said this, it's not easy, right? It takes a lot of effort when it comes to coordinating, above all. Someone will have to sacrifice themselves in being the coordinator of everyone. This job of the coordinator, which I touched upon previously on what actually the job of the state will have to be, as in fact all my 3 colleagues said, is a very important one.
Interesting. Moving to Jude and looking at
So you told me this is going to be a casual discussion, so can I jump into this?
Yes, please, go ahead.
So to your point, Dr. George, I think the things that we've been kind of experimenting as well within QRDI Council is the idea of a knowledge transfer partnership. The kind of first cohort, or the first 2 cohorts, were specifically about supporting a specific talented individual to bridge the gap between academia and industry. The second, the second track that we're now kind of experimenting with, and it was actually an outcome of a discussion we had with Georgetown, a roundtable we had with Georgetown, which is how could we do that actually for academia and government entities. So bridging the gap between academia and government entities. So if you've talked about the trade lab as being focused on government, maybe or policy making or policy relevant research. But I think there's also, an opportunity to also embed, because, in advanced countries, you would see the labs being actually embedded within government entities. And we solve for that by this knowledge transfer partnership. So it's something that we could explore, inshallah. Yeah.
Jude, can we even explore, looking at the nature of this topic, basically transferring vision to reality? We know QRDI enables that through Qatar Open Innovation, and you have some cases with government entities. Would you be able to share that and see how that really brought an outputs to those organizations?
Yeah, sure. So to begin with, Qatar Open Innovation starts with a government entity or a ministry that defines or formulates a problem statement, so a real-life challenge, and then invites different innovators worldwide to come and co-develop a prototype funded by QRDI. So over the past few cohorts, I think we funded 40 projects specifically for government entities. And I think we've seen, to be honest, substantial impact that not to say we were not expecting, but we were very surprised to see the demand actually there, right? And one of the maybe examples that I'd like to always share is the collaboration we had with the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, where a technology for rapid detection of chemical mixtures in specific entry ports in Qatar was tested and deployed actually within the Ministry of Environment. And I think some maybe key takeaways that we've learned in this process is that once you have the kind of top-down buy-in, things get accelerated. And His Excellency, the Minister of Environment and Climate Change, is a true believer and champion of innovation and understands and recognizes the true value of innovations and technologies to improve public services. But we also have many other examples that I can mention, but also to kind of take a step back. We talked about capacity building, right? Everyone here talked about capacity building because of the capability gap that we see in Qatar. And alhamdulillah, we've come a long way. But our government innovation training program also, I think it's one of the first maybe government training programs that we proudly collaborate with Civil Service Bureau on. And this program supported building the innovation capabilities within the participants, within government entities and ministries, to start, again, formulating the problem or the challenge. We call it opportunity. We don't like to call it a challenge, right? So formulate opportunities and then understand how innovations, whether technologies or policies or enhancements in standards, etc., can solve those problems. And then also how to manage the portfolio, how to manage the innovation projects and ensure piloting and adoption. And we've had, I think, 10 cycles so far with around 300 participants. And what was beautiful is that we actually saw a lot of real life examples and real life challenges that were actioned into solutions that were tested and adopted. So yeah, and maybe also just to double down on that and to say that Qatar Open Innovation looks at maybe the technology side, but we've also had great successes in our national research grant and our policy-driven kind of instruments, or even applied technology, but on the research side and not on the kind of business innovation side, where we can cite many examples of standards that were implemented either in entities like Ashghal and Ministry of Environment, standards for pavement construction, a standard for recycled materials and using the recycled materials for construction, but also air-conditioned in stadiums and the World Cup. So Supreme Committee for Legacy and Delivery were the adopters of that, but also educational technology adopted by Ministry of Education. And that started as research projects from academia. So that's also something I wanted to highlight.
Interesting. Moving to CGB with Hissa and looking at the government accelerators, you guys had a few cases within the government accelerator recently tackling government challenges, and you were able to provide an outputs. Can you share some of them?
Of course. Since the inception of the government initiative accelerators, our innovation lab, we have done many sprints. So basically, we believe that the innovation is not just technology. It could be a result, a policy change. It could be a design, a service redesigned. It could be several things, not just a technology layer to it. So basically, one of the examples that I would always like to share, it's a sprint that we've done with the Ministry of Education and Higher Education. Basically, just a step back, in the Innovation Lab in CGB, we focus on the national priorities. We focus on the NDS projects because we understand that innovation is relatively a new concept today in the government. Yes, there are some governments very advanced and mature when it comes to innovation. Some still they're building their innovation capabilities and capacity within. That's where the innovation accelerator comes and steps in. So basically, for the sprints that we've done, yes, we've done sprints with entities that are very mature in innovation and entities that are still, trying to be where the other entities are. But that doesn't mean that they are failing or they are a failure. Of course not. It's just how people differently adapt to innovation and how fast they are in adopting innovation in their workplace. So basically, we've done one sprint with Qatar Tourism where we introduced the Smart Companion and their application. And all of those projects that we've done for all of the different sectors and the government entities, they are targeted, or actually they are serving one of the national outcomes. There are 7 national outcomes. So basically, if you look at the QT, they are focused today on the economic sustainability. And Qatar today is heavily depending on petrochemicals, and there is a direction that it will move away from petrochemicals, introducing other ways of economic growth and sustaining the economy. So one of it could be tourism. So by doing that, we collaborated with Qatar Tourism and we developed a Smart Companion where actually helps the tourists to come to Doha, and it acts as your personal secretary, basically, Naif. So basically, it's in an app. When you download the app, QT app, there is a small component that says a travel companion. You can either record your voice or text it. For example, you can say, I'm a family of 5. We have a budget of 5,000 riyals. Just plan my visit to Doha. And it gives you the plan, it gives you the where you can go as a family, where to dine, and the prices and whatnot. And because of that intervention that we did, or the sprint, QT was awarded with 2 awards during the Web Summit 2025. And this is something that we would have been able to do it without the heavy collaboration also with the QT. One of the other sprints that we've done was the second sprint with the National Planning Council, the NPC. Today, all of us in the room, government entities representative, we have a portfolio of national outcomes that we need to deliver through national initiatives. So now today, it's all manual. Not all of it, but like most of the process is manual. So what we did is we created a PMO system for the MPC, where actually the relevant stakeholders, the ministries also, the minister, the project owner would be able to see the project and the progress of the project, and if there is any support that needed to push the project forward. And then we did the third sprint was with MOSI. where we actually, they came to us and there were some challenges in activating commercial attaches internationally, and we've created for them, we built on one of the CRMs where actually they can, because they do have a national outcome where they have to increase the attaches from 4 to 10, and we have them developing a CRM that actually can connect all the relevant stakeholders that actually contribute to the foreign direct investment in Doha. And then the last sprint that we did was with education. So basically that, it's about activating or reimagining extracurricular in the public school, sorry. And it's interesting, this is one of the closest sprints to my heart actually, because it touches the students immediately and the parents as well. And there is a huge emphasis in Doha today that you have to prepare the future ready workforce. And this is, if my memory serves me right, is the 4th priority, national priority in the NDS3. So basically today in Qatar, we don't really see the value of the extracurricular. We think that, okay, if I'm a parent, I would only focus that my kid would excel in academics to be an A student, and then how he can speak or carry himself or how she can act will come on naturally in the way. But basically it's, the focus, what we did is that the focus should not be only academia. It should be also the social aspect of the child himself. So basically the extracurricular it's really important in shaping them, because tomorrow you're preparing them to tackle future challenges, to build that country, and to carry on the legacy that has already been started. So as an outcome of this sprint, we came up with 3 potential areas of, I would say, innovative areas. One of them was the guiding. There was no unified definition of an extracurricular and the importance of it. So what we did is we developed a guidebook of the extracurricular. We built on the policy that already has been existed to enhance it further, and then we gave them a platform, because we cannot shy away from technology. Technology comes in everything. Today, even if you try to innovate and there will be no technology layer, you will most probably not succeed in reaching the outcome that you desire. So basically we give them 3 things. So we can see that innovation is not just technology, it could be also enhancement in the policies and the procedures. So this is what we've done in the government accelerators.
Interesting, very rich and very massive. يعطيكم العافية. Iman, tapping into the shifting vision into something tangible, and we know for a fact in the innovation lab within MCIT focus on that and mainly on the emerging tech. And with that, you guys created the controlled environment to be able to provide safe space for government to test emerging tech in a controlled manners. Take us through that experience in terms of benefits, value added, bottlenecks, challenges.
So since the inception of the Innovation Lab in February of 2020, we wanted to create a platform for the governmental entities to explore and experiment emerging technologies for the different challenges they're exploring. And I have a different perspective from Hissa when it comes to, let's say, the same challenge that she has addressed with in the Innovation Accelerator. It was approached to me first. And I was like, this is not something that we can address with emerging technology. There is a lot of components that you need to look at, and Hissa was the right space for that, because they needed to come up with a definition, they needed to address their policy gaps, and then the solution came. So for us, what we look at is there are clear problems that could be addressed with emerging technologies. And these are the ones that we try to create this safe space for it. And within the Innovation Lab, we have the AI sandbox and the XR sandbox. And these 2 emerging technologies were creating this secure environment that supports the entities to even collaborate with the startup ecosystem who have knowledge in these technologies. And I guess it's a good way for them to introduce to the ecosystem. But most importantly, it's an area for them to validate their concepts and how this emerging technology can be intertwined into their environments, and for them to have that safeguarded let's say, controls. And of course, they are introduced to the different expertise from the advisory capabilities that we have. And from there, we see a live result of how data is integrated from their side, to have a live POC for them to see how it can potentially be scaled up into and implemented into a real project. And I guess this is some of the great examples, like some of them, the examples that are mentioned by Jude, like with Minister of Environment, now scaled up with us to a major hazardous platform where we are implementing across the full life cycle of a hazardous material. And the data driven from that one project is actually now looking into integrating 10 different entities. And this is how we see this perspective. So having the validity from that single function gives you a good insight where to improve and how to look at the different moving parts that you need to integrate. Similarly with Qatar tourism, this is one of our major sectors that we are having advanced digital transformation roadmaps. But again, having the ability to test on certain functionalities, see the market fit or the reactions of the customers or the residents in Doha and the visitors is very important. Now, there is a huge roadmap how to transform that into a full experience across many different areas within tourism. So I guess this early validations, and I guess this is a concept where a lot of the government does not, there is no room for us to fail. When we implement a big project, we need to implement it well. But having the innovation lab, this is a room for you to test, experiment, see the validity of what you are trying to implement before you go for a full-scale, full-fledged implementation. So I guess this is kind of where the concept is driven. And of course, we have seen great examples in many governments, whether it's in Estonia, Singapore, even UK, where it's not only influenced how they are implementing the technologies, but also the regulatory aspect of it. Because sometimes when you're testing a certain technology, and especially when it comes to emerging technologies, you see there are regulatory gaps. And this is a way for us to have an early detection for us where we have room to improve before we do this major rollouts.
Interesting. Iman, very interesting contribution. Now, this moves us to, I think, a different topic, basically governance. Well, I know you're one of the first people that you've been advocating for that. And I think it's driven by the actual implementation on the ground and the overlaps now is taking place. And you just mentioned a couple of examples where you had an interaction with CGB on a certain case, where you had an interaction with QRDI. So from your point of view, when we talk about governance to govern the collaboration across the main stakeholder, how do you see it today? What is the maturity? How do you envision it?
I think governance is very important when implementing and orchestrating, and I think we all have complementary and different parts where if we're going to look at it as a supply chain, I think QRDI is more connected to the academia, where they have an early insight to the really cutting-edge technologies and an early insight on that. And also they have a lot of activities that are looking at capacity building and a full formulation on all of that, plus the incentives of the financial aspect of that, which supports a lot of the pilots. But I think governance can either empower or kill the innovation. So when you see governance, it's something that you would like it to guide, but not overguard a concept. And it's good to have a clear set of roles, responsibility, and accountability on entities on what is going to be done within the innovation ecosystem. And I guess most importantly for me, when I talk about innovation, it's not about red taping. It's about having the safe environment for us to experiment and continue on that. And I think the way that once you have a clear established role when it comes to governance and the responsibilities, it's good to have a measurement towards that. And I think we are seeing that clearly. It's cascading from the NDS to the entity strategies, and it's complementary, like how we are looking at the projects and how everything is detailed. And I have a very good example of that, especially when it comes to the startup ecosystem. There is the strong governance between all the different entities of how we, which is the Startup Qatar Task Force, where we all have clear roles and responsibilities. We all have our incentive packages, and we are all complementing under that umbrella. And this is to kind of guide the startup ecosystem of where are the different things in their, let's say, maturity or growth of the company, where they can approach, or the different incentives that exist for them. For instance, the Digital Incubation Center at MCIT, it's for very early stage. This is when the entrepreneur wants to build their ideas. And for us, how we can support them and enable them. But then at a later stage, when the entrepreneur has matured, they need to go to a funding ecosystem or get accelerated in a certain, and there are programs for that. And I think there is a clear orchestration now, and governance supports that when you have clear roles and responsibilities and a way to measure it.
Yeah, please.
I want to jump into this conversation because governance is I think is a concept that's very close to my heart as well. And we've been trying to study it for the past, 7 years since the establishment of QRDI Council. And I think that's what really led to the, a newly launched decree of the foundation, which is what we're transitioning into. And I completely agree with Iman. And I think I want to go back to what you first said. You said there are overlaps, right? And I think there are perceived overlaps. And that's because it's not very clear to the public what the roles and responsibilities of every enabling entity is. But not only that, it's because we're also working in silos. I'm saying in silos not because we don't talk to each other. We do talk to each other very often, but there is no central, let's say, framework that brings us together, like the startup committee task force that Iman mentioned. And I think when you take a step back and think about roles and mandates, you always go back to your, let's say, mandates, your legal frameworks, your governance frameworks, which I think did a great job in defining roles and responsibilities and KPIs that we all have, right? So for QRDI, our main KPI is R&D expenditure, right? It's gross R&D expenditure. So everything we do in QRDI, whether it was a funding program or a support program, is trying to increase that. So trying to increase the activities because of different reasons that we don't have to get into, talent and economic development, etc. But I think for different entities, they have different types of KPIs and different targets and ambitions, which are complementary for sure. But I think definitely a concerted effort, moving from fragmented efforts to this kind of orchestrated efforts towards the end goal of, let's say, government innovation or public innovation would come a long way for sure.
George, do you want?
Maybe I can. I would like, in a way, to mention a couple of things. When it comes to governance and regulation. Okay, so there used to be, in a way, some sort of a misperception that some of the things that pertain to new technologies, digital technologies, emerging technologies, should not be touched upon by the government. Namely, the government shouldn't do anything. I don't agree with that, and reality and practice, has proven this approach in a way wrong. So there are regulation can be used in many different ways, right? And it really depends on political, social, cultural, economic type of choices that each and every society will have to do. And I would like to mention some examples here. So the first way of understanding regulation is as prohibition, let's say, or constraint, right? We see that, for example, here with cryptocurrencies, right? The Qatar Central Bank, for its own reasons, probably rightly so, has made a firm choice. No cryptocurrencies, right, to be used in the country, one way or the other. Fair enough. That's a legitimate choice. That's probably the right choice policy-making wise. Now, secondly, regulation can also be used, as we've explained already in this around this table, to enable, right? Examples of this. Regulation of new digital technologies when you want to attract the relevant ecosystem onto your own jurisdiction. A very good example for our purposes is the QFC Digital Assets Framework that was adopted roughly 1.5 years ago. A choice was made there, right? To actually develop an ecosystem through a regulatory framework that would allow both the domestic incubation of relevant businesses as well as the attraction from abroad of relevant business. A third example, sometimes regulation does operate as, opening up, as liberalization, let's say. The example that I really like to always bring up in this context is the relevant provision of the data privacy law of the state of Qatar, which actually includes a very liberal cross-border data flow provision, which actually disallows data controllers as well as processors of data, from keeping data within the country. This was done with a particular rationale in mind, namely, to try to attract a relevant business, the relevant ecosystem to the state of Qatar, which has actually happened pretty successfully, right? If you get to see that, all the data centers and clouds, the most important ones, have actually set up a shop in the country. So there are very many different ways to understand the regulation, and there always has to be a nuance on how regulation is to be used and based on what political, economic, cultural, etc. priorities.
I see. On a similar topic with Hissa, so basically QRDI established 6 years ago. The Government Development Bureau established probably 2-3 years ago. There's the intersection on government innovation. So you've been working collaboratively with QRDI to unify the strategy toward government innovation. How did that?
Correct. It's true. We at CGB, we are the accelerator, the government accelerator. So basically, we focus more on the how the government, the public sector should operate. As I said, the design, the services how should be designed. We enable the government entities as well. We enable them how to be innovative, and we build a cultural innovation as well. Collaborating is correct. We have started conversations with QRDI around building a unified innovation strategy for the public sector, because I don't see we are competing against each other. I think our roles actually complement. QRDI brings the R&D side of innovation. It brings in the innovation infrastructure, and also it's the linkage between the private sector as well. Probably this is something that we don't have collectively in the government sector. So I see our roles, and instead of doubling the efforts, we are complementing each other's efforts. And instead of having just an individual project, I think we're moving toward having a national movement when it comes to innovation.
Moving to another topic, so basically, alhamdulillah, I think we are blessed that we can really afford building infrastructure, world-class finishes. But there is a huge topic around capacity building, and this goes across. So looking at CGB specifically and the Government Accelerator, you recently published an innovation guidebook that enables and empower government employees to foster that process and journey. How did that play a role in literally upskilling government employees?
Correct. We have launched our the first edition of the Innovation Playbook around January this year. And upon the launch of the playbook, so basically we see it as a tool to enable the government sector and to enable the entities to be innovative themselves. Because we are here to help you to innovate, but at one point we need to create sustainability when it comes to innovation. So the purpose of the playbook, when we looked at the innovation in the public sector, the term innovation, it was not defined. across the entities. So basically, some of them they see innovation as invention, some of them they see innovation as a recreation, some they see them as enhancement. So what we did in the playbook, we unified the definition of innovation. We actually highlighted who are the stakeholders of or the big players in Doha when it comes to innovation. We spoke about the ecosystem and the innovation of innovation in the playbook. And actually, we have also introduced the sprint model that we follow when we do when we accelerate projects. So if I shed more lights on the model that we follow in the government initiative accelerator, when we take on a project to accelerate, this project goes through 4 phases. So basically, those 4 phases, they run for 8 weeks. Each of these phases run for 2 weeks. For example, if we take the example of education, I would say, the first phase that we run was discovery. The discovery phase, and instead of tackling the challenge from top down, we tackle it from bottom up. So basically, we interview the stakeholders, we interview the business owner, we interview the end users as well, because all of our solutions that we come up with in the Innovation Lab, they're people-centered, because this is where you can see the impacts are higher and bigger, and this is the tangible impact that we really want to see across the entities. So basically, the discovery phase, where we actually invite the business owners and we invite the end users, as I said, and when we invite the stakeholders to come together to explore, actually, and pinpoint where the challenge is. And by pinpointing the challenge, by interviewing them, this will lead us to go to the next phase, which is ideation, where we invite all the people that we've interviewed in our innovation lab, where they come in and they ideate around the challenges. And there are certain rules that we follow in the innovation lab. There are friendly rules, actually, that we shouldn't be judging each other's ideas, and we should be building on each other's ideas, and we are looking after the quantity but not the quality of the idea. So basically what happens, we collect all these ideas, and then whether it come from a parent or from a business owner or from a service provider, we collect all these ideas and then we formulate them into concepts that lead us to the 3rd and 4th stages, which are the co-designing, the definition, and the POC. The reason why I mentioned that methodology, because this is something that we also enable our fellow entities to follow. And we've seen that this model has proven to work across the sprints that we've done. So the playbook actually has outlined theoretically the sprint, the methodology itself, and we practice it in the innovation lab. So when we invite the entities over, they can see that actually whatever is written there as a theory, it's actually put into practice, and it's been alive. And since the inception of the playbook, actually, it was frankly exciting to see that a lot of entities have reached out to us to make sure that their innovation policies actually align with our playbook. And we have done over 5 or 6 revisions on certain policies when it comes to government entities to make sure that they're aligning with the playbook. Now, the practices of the playbook are not mandatory to follow, but it's a really good guidebook. When drafting your policy, when you're drafting your innovation strategy, it gives you the real insight and to make your policy and strategy more impactful.
I see. Going to Iman and the Innovation Lab, the fact you guys are focusing on emerging tech, which is continuously keep advancing. And with that advancement, there is always this gap between the advancement of the technology and the people behind the technology. So how did you guys address that from MCIT, iLab, your experience between public-private sector of capacity building approach?
Yeah. I think the Innovation Lab is where learning meets doing. And in that space, we enable, let's say, an expert with an entity to build knowledge and co-create. And fortunately now with the advancements of technology, if we're looking at the AI sandbox, it's a low-code, no-code. And people can use the different prompting styles if they can articulate their concepts very well, and there are the experts around them that can actually help them to complement the knowledge gaps that they have, and for them to even build it in this area. And I think the hands-on skills that they get in that environment is the opportunity where the Innovation Lab gives them to build a strong concept, and for them to take it forward and even take it further. Like most recently in our cycle, we had different we have different entities and with different challenges. And we had different level of expertise, and we were able to match them with different experts in different domains. So let's go for the example of Ministry of Finance, who came up with the concept, and it's a very challenging thing to do when the IT department is trying to comply with the national policies when it comes to cybersecurity. So for them, they can build their internal policies, but are they really compliant to the national ones? And for them, they wanted to create a tool that helps them identify that and match with, like, it's 5-6 different national policies, and for them to really update that, and for them to go through all these documents and make sure that they are aligned to that. They were able to build that tool inside the AI sandbox, and for them to be able to get a recommendation how to enhance and how to fill that. And that was a very tough exercise, and it was a lot of meetings back and forth and reviews between them and the entities that are publishing these national policies. So we got to see an entity that had a very clear challenge, and it's something that we know is a challenge that is across all ministries, and they have proven a concept, built the knowledge, and now they are an expert entity that will help us implement this on a national level. So this is an example where we built skill, capacity, and knowledge in a certain environment, in a certain domain, which is the AI development environment.
Interesting.
And of course, if you're talking about cybersecurity policies, we wanted to test mechanisms of having the AI run on the device rather than on the cloud. So that was something that we wanted to validate as well. So that was a very good example where we built knowledge and understood the challenges that we wanted to tackle. And I guess we got to see it across 6 different entities in 5 different domains.
Interesting. Dr. George, picking on what Iman just mentioned, looking at technology as an enabler to fulfill capacity gaps in general, how do you see that from an academia research point of view in terms of implementing technology to fulfill that, to be able to develop and advance policy?
In fact, in the experience of the last couple of decades, above all, let's say with digital technology, right? Obviously, there's different types of technologies, but what we're mostly touching upon are digital technologies. There are, largely speaking, 3 main areas, that digital technologies help, with digital transformation in the public sector, generally speaking. Number 1, data-driven decision making, right? This is the major advancement that governments all over the world have achieved with the development and the rise of digital technologies. That's, in a way, the most important thing. Number 2, and some countries and some governments, make better use of that than others, is enhanced public engagement. Namely, allowing people to participate in the decision-making processes one way or the other, at the grand level as well as at the smaller scale, smaller level. So, for example, Estonia, that Iman mentioned before, has an e-consultation platform that allows all citizens in the country to actually participate in the development of, in the process of the development of the policies, as well as various types of regulatory various types of rules, regulatory instruments. And number 3, equally important in a way, which is something that we've been hearing about, is service efficiency, right? We all know that the biggest problem of the bureaucracy is the bureaucracy, right? The biggest problem of the public sector is, what I want to say, is bureaucracy, right? Digital technologies have allowed us to cut through that big issue, right? We all use the government apps here in Qatar. Some countries, do touch upon the example of Estonia as well. Again, have transferred all the knowledge that the government has been able to produce in different types of blockchain, which is very securely stored, and they can be used, as well as the validation methods of the blockchain can be used without necessarily going through the top of the hierarchy in order to come back down, right? In such areas as, for example, healthcare records or transfer of real estate, real property, etc., etc., etc. Now, when it comes to efficiency, the one area which I see coming up very fast, and being the concern of most tech-savvy governments at the moment, is digital identities. For sure, it is. Again, Estonia is one of the greatest examples, as well as obviously Singapore, where they've developed the different applications and technologies whereby, every citizen as well as every resident has the capacity to develop, an identity within the cloud. In the case of Estonia, again, stored on the blockchain, which is very important for the purposes of safety, security, cybersecurity, right? So, and this is an area which is coming up very fast in the considerations of different countries around the world.
Thank you. I would like to move to the to the last part of the conversation, basically sustainability. And alhamdulillah, we're doing really good in establishing and kick things off. But on the long term, how can we assure a sustainable momentum when it's about fostering innovation? So looking at QRDI and Jude, from funding structure, how do you envision a mechanism that could assure a sustainable momentum?
Okay, so I guess let me take a step back and think about where we are today in terms of opportunities first, right? I think we're in a pivotal moment today where the National Development Strategy, the third National Development Strategy, recognizes innovation as one of its elements for economic growth. The country has set very ambitious targets when it comes to innovation. So we're in a position to kind of shift gears and actually start accelerating our efforts, right? And we all touched upon the fact that we have all the kind of, let's say, ingredients or the components of the puzzle in the ecosystem, whether it was, the national champions that are based, that we consider our assets, or government entities that also form kind of like a living platform for demand and for innovation, or academic institutions that are strong, or enabling entities like QRDI and MCIT and Diwan al-Khidma. So the ingredients are there. And I think the concept, that maybe you brought forward, Naif, about this public innovation lab and this kind of central body that could bring all these efforts together is a very interesting one for me, because thinking about it, again, going back to my public innovation and government innovation concepts, I feel like this lab actually sits in the intersection of both. So it works inside ministries to kind of work on how ministries could be, let's say, ready for technology and just general innovative solutions adoption through capacity building, through programs, but also it works outside, and it works to bridge ministries with the wider ecosystem, right? By co-funding things like open innovation, translating those real-life challenges within ministries to the wider ecosystem of academia and of startups and corporates. Remind me of your question now.
Sustainability.
The sustainability, yes, we got to the sustainability. So in terms of now, the sustainability of such a model, right? Obviously, thinking about funding and sustainability of funding, you have to think about a hybrid model, right? And it has to start first with a core public funding that is institutionalized. So this is one definite thing. Even if it was a lean team within, the center of government or within government entities, there has to be core funding that supports the operations of this body, right? But then going forward, obviously, you'd have to think about ways to start co-funding with the right entities, with the innovation agencies of a country. And that's, where QRDI comes into play. And I think, when you look at our programs, we really span the whole innovation value chain, right? So we start from talent development, so supporting innovation capabilities within ministries. This is in the context of public innovation, of course. Then we go into scientific research, which generates the knowledge and generates the scientific evidence base. And then we go into technology development, which de-risks innovations and supports government entities think about maybe co-developing with the private sector. And then piloting, which basically positions government as a living lab and as a test bed for innovations and technologies, whether policies or whether technology-based innovations. And then, of course, and that's, I think, where Iman comes in. And when you said this beautiful example of taking that technology into kind of scaling it up and creating that uptake. And this is where, the procurement and the adoption comes into play. And from our side, with procurement and adoption, we advocate for things like, actual enabling procurement governance frameworks or procurement frameworks. And again, looking at examples in other advanced economies, the pre-commercial procurement models are something that we should look at, because our current procurement models are not, I don't think, are designed to fit with experimentation. And so a pre-commercial procurement model would actually release funding based on stages of R&D, right? And based until the full rollout of a solution. So something like that can really take us a long way. So I touched upon funding mechanisms, but also maybe just general frameworks that could also support.
Thank you for bringing this, like a big picture on how you look at it from a QRDI point of view. Last thing with Iman, when mentioning scaling. So I know you guys work early on testing emerging tech, and you've been always have that thought on the procurement process, which is post testing of scaling that and bring it up to scale.
we have to be very honest here. Procurement or government procurement is meant for, it's a system that's built for stability. And it needs, let's say, it's designed to reward the compliance of the vendor towards certain rules. And when you talk about, as Jude said very well, it does not reward on experimentation. You cannot do that with the public procurement. And I think if we are going to look at enhancements of how procurement is being shaped today, I think there should be a bridge between how we are innovating now and how we are procuring the solutions at a later stage. I think this is still a gap in the ecosystem. If I'm speaking very honestly here, if I find validation in a certain solution, I need to wait at least 6 to 8 months before I can even procure it to scale it. And this does not, when we're talking about the definition of innovation, it also has the aspect of speed. And government public procurement does not have the speed. And this makes sense because there is a level of compliance that needs to be met. But again, if we have validation, if we have the right criteria that is met, there should be an accelerated mechanism that supports the procurement of innovation. And I think this is something that we would like to see in the near future. And I guess this is something after the many success stories that we have seen and the continuous experimentation and the open-mindedness of the government as a whole. I think this is something that we will likely see because the procurement law is continuously being enhanced. It's continuously being revised. It's finding ways to be more inclusive of the different private sector capabilities, from the SMEs to the large-scale providers. And even for us as a government, we need to be conscious of the opportunities that we are providing to the market as a demand, and which part of a segment of the market are going to be satisfying these procurement needs. So I guess this is something that we are looking at, and I think the outcomes in the near future should be an accelerated way for innovation procurement.
Thank you. Thank you. To conclude, I have maybe 2 takeaways and one, I think, collective suggestion. The first takeaway, I think Qatar has an advantage. It's a small country, very close. So having something between centralized and decentralized hybrid, it really brings huge value within that small state size. So I think this is an advantage that really adds value to us. And I learned so much out of you guys today. So this is the first takeaway. The second takeaway, it requires a fitness. It's a long-term game. يعني literally having this culture shift mindset, it takes a long time. And this is where I reflect when we first had the sport day, Qatar National Sport Day. It started 10 years ago. And today, all my kids, they are sport savvy. يعني. Literally, all of them are athletes. يعني, ما شاء الله. But I saw out of that national drive to focus on, okay, sport is a national thing. Then we have that national day. We have the investment across the infrastructure, people, all of that. And 10 years later, we can see the younger generation are really considering a healthy lifestyle. This drives me to I think, the collective suggestion, and being able to build a collective culture where people, they don't fear failure. They celebrate failure. This is where I think literally we need to have Qatar National Innovation Day. At something that we can come together, public sector, private sector, community, students, professionals, and let's celebrate. We did it in Qatar, similar to the sport day, and we can see the impact 10 years on our kids today. Imagine this in 5-7 years down the road, if all of us come together celebrating that one day, regardless of success or failure. But it's about knowledge sharing. يعني. Thank you guys. Thank you for your time. It was very generous. يعطيكم العافية. ما قصرت. Thank you. Thank you.